Oh, can you guys hear me now? Okay, good. So I'm here with Will from The Boring Revolution. The Boring Revolution is my favorite YouTube channel. Will talks about all kinds of things, Boring Company, and I get very excited about what he's doing. So here's what we're going to do. And first of all, thank you to everybody for catching me on the sound. So first we're going to talk about Will's channel, The Boring Revolution, one of my favorite channels on YouTube. Then we're going to talk about the present state of the Boring Company, what projects are going on right now. And then my exciting thing, we're going to talk about the future of the Boring Company. Where is it going? So, Will, your channel, you do a lot of live streams about what's going on with the Boring Company. How'd you get started? Why are you excited? And what's your channel about?
Yeah. So I've been based in the construction industry for nearly 15 years now, and I've worked all over the UK for the water industry. I work for a surveying practice, for a property developer, and I've kind of come into sort of the latter end of my career. I'm doing something now that's a bit more less engineering based, and I've always been interested in engineering. And the Boring Company came along, and I thought to myself, you know what, this is really, really interesting. It kind of backs onto my my background in engineering, and everything that Elon Musk has done to now has been really, really fascinating. Certainly Tesla and SpaceX, and just the thought of being able to bore tunnels at extremely fast speeds and build infrastructure networks at a rapid pace, that kind of really, really interested me. And so my background in construction allows me to talk about various things that are going on with the Boring Company, how I think they're going to build it, how I think they're going to improve the TBMs, how they can integrate their infrastructure into the existing infrastructure. And all that to me is super, super interesting. And I've been continually impressed with Elon Musk, and especially Steve Davis, who's essentially running the Boring Company at the moment. And so I guess it interests a lot of people in terms of ending soul destroying traffic, as it were.
Okay, so it seems to me you do almost daily updates on what's going on with the Boring Company. Tell me what, how do you schedule your videos? Is it daily? Is it every other day? How often do you make I feel like I see you a lot.
Yeah, I tend to do a video maybe every 3 to 4 days if I get the time. Sometimes I like to do 2 videos, sort of one on the back of the other. It just depends. The news cycle is kind of a bit sporadic. Sometimes you might not hear anything for a week. Then you might have 3 or 4 news stories in the space of 2 days. So I just kind of look at what's out there and kind of plan accordingly, as it were.
Okay, and I've noticed you do a lot of live streams. It doesn't seem like you do a lot of edited videos. What's this? My focus has been
Yes.
I just finished a video. For those who are watching, I'm going to do a video about the Model 4 or the Model A. I'm still a bit quiet. I got to fix my sound now, apparently. All right, let me add a filter. I'm going to add the gain filter. Let's see if that helps. Does that help? Can you guys hear me better? I don't understand what's going on with that. Well, I'm going to try. I'm trying to balance by lowering Will's volume a little bit. We'll see. Anyway, so I make videos where I talk about I put together package videos. So I have a video that I just finished, that I just uploaded. It's not public yet. It is about Tesla model, the next Tesla, the one that's going to be designed in China, the Shanghai Gigafactory's design factory, Shanghai Design Center. Elon talked that they're going to build a new Tesla there or design a new Tesla there. So I made a video where I'm projecting what that is, but that's like an edited video. I do live streams like this, and I'm going to do some on just me. But it seems like you don't do any of the edited videos. What's the reason for that?
I mean, I'd love to learn how to edit videos. I probably could learn it quite quickly, but in terms of sort of managing my time, it just sort of comes up, and I just think, you know what, I'm going to do a video on XYZ, and I just do it, and then I just send it out. I really enjoy doing the live streams. You get a lot of questions that you wouldn't otherwise think about. You even get a few people that really don't like Elon Musk or the Boring Company, and they come on and ask me some questions. So it's quite interesting to see their point of view and to help educate them. So all in all, it's that's how it's kind of worked out, really. Yeah.
Yeah. So I find that the edited videos take a lot more work. I put
Yes.
hours. If you do a live stream, you just do the live stream. There's a little bit of setup, and obviously, if you're better at it, you get the audio set up right in the first place. But with the editing, I definitely have audio problems in my editing, and I have to redo it. I spent
Yeah.
maybe 10 hours at least on an edited video, so I just feel like they reach
Wow.
more, that they deliver more in a short time, and people watch them more. I don't know how you feel about that. Do you feel like you're getting enough views?
Yeah, it's very kind of mixed. Like some of the videos I've done have got, 40, 50,000 views. Some of them, like, yesterday's only got around 600 or 700, but over time, it's generally getting around, 5 to 6,000, which is good for me. The channel's growing at a good rate. I'm really happy to have 4,000 subscribers. I think personally for me, kind of giving away 10 hours of my time would be very, very difficult. I have a young son, and he just wants to go out and do things, and it would be a nightmare trying to do that. So personally for me, I think my time with my son is a little bit more valuable, so I kind of give it to him, as it were. But I think at some point I will try and do edited videos. Yeah, most
Would you
definitely.
say this is more of a hobby for you?
Yeah, I kind of look at it like that. I probably do take it a bit more seriously than I realise. I certainly been thinking about our interview today quite a bit, and been very excited towards that. And I think the best thing about the Boring Company is they're constantly learning new things all the time. There's constantly new pieces of information coming out there, and really, really, it's just a lot of people are very, very interested in the Boring Company and what Elon Musk is doing, and being able to help people understand how that's going to develop, I find very, very
Oh,
interesting.
just for those who are watching, there's a link in the video description to Will's channel, Boring Revolution. There's also a link to his Twitter. We follow each other on Twitter as well. So let's talk about where the Boring Company is now. I think the biggest project going is Las Vegas, right? And so I think the tunnel am I correct that the tunnels for the convention center part of the project are done?
Yeah, so they finished both the tunnels about 2 months ago. So they used the same TBM for both tunnels. So they bored the first tunnel, then brought the TBM back for the second tunnel, and then finished that. They've also installed the concrete road deck as well in both tunnels. So essentially both tunnels are complete. The majority of works are in regards to the station canopy and the various ramps that are going to be constructed for the various stations. So in terms of the original program, the Boring Company is well ahead of schedule, which even surprised me. And I've worked in the industry for quite a while. So they should hopefully start calibrating and testing vehicles mid to late November. But all in all, everything's gone very, very well. The actual first tunnel that they bored, they really struggled. They really struggled for the first 3 to 4 weeks. They were averaging about 11 to 13 meters per day. As they got to the halfway mark, the TBM suddenly I don't know what exactly happened. There were a few new members of the team, and they made some adjustmets to the TBM, but they managed to get it up to around 20 to 25 meters per day. And then they bettered that on the second tunnel. They averaged around 27 meters per day, which is very good for TBMs in 2020, as it were. So very good progress.
Let me just ask you you mentioned the tunnel boring machine. Were they using, now they started with Godot, the tunnel in Los Angeles that they did by SpaceX headquarters was Godot. Was this tunnel boring machine Linestorm or Proofrock?
I'd say it was somewhere in between Godot and Linestorm. It is somewhat of a compromise, the machine they're using at Las Vegas. So it's a totally different machine from the one at Hawthorne. So it's an earth pressure bore EPB machine, and that's mixed phase conditions. So they built essentially a new machine from scratch for that job. It has a lot of new features, as it were, from the original Godot machine. So it's got much more powerful motors in there, and it's also got an element of autonomy when it comes to erecting the precast concrete segments. But other than that, it's very, very, very similar to Godot.
Okay, that was one of the things I don't remember if I heard. I think I heard it on your channel that when they were boring, at least the second tunnel, the machine was building the concrete walls of the tunnel as it was boring, which is something that previous boring technology did not do. Am I correct?
No, so they're still having to stop when they're erecting the concrete segments, but they're doing so at quite a rapid rate. So they're using the standard kind of rectangular concrete
Okay,
segments.
so the machine itself is not building the because isn't that the long-term plan? Is that as it's boring, it's making the tunnel walls behind it or alongside of it?
Absolutely. So if they want to get closer to the actual speed of a snail or a garden snail, they're going to have to assemble the concrete segments and thrust forward with the machine at the same time. The only way I can think that they're going to do that is by using a different style of concrete segment. So maybe use a hexagonal concrete segment, because what you end up with is teeth protruding from the actual segments, and then you can push forward at all times. That's possibly the only way I can think of that they can do it. And certainly with Proofrock, I imagine that's how they're going to move forward with that particular machine.
Okay, so speaking specifically about Las Vegas now, we're going to talk about the other projects that are happening or in the works. My impression is that, first of all, they have to finish the stations and the other support things for this convention center project, but they've talked about extending it to casinos and the airport. Where does that stand?
So they're currently in contract negotiations with Resorts World and the Wynn Encore Casino. So that's going to be a single tunnel for both projects. They'll be totally separate projects, and they'll run that more as a shuttle service. So they'll have maybe a stack of up to 7 to 10 vehicles, run them through the tunnel, and then run people back the other way. But it looks like contract negotiations are going to be completed before Christmas, and hopefully both projects will start at the beginning of Q1.
So I want to be clear about that. One tunnel for both directions to each resort, or two separate tunnels to each resort, or what are we talking about there? Or
yeah, so it's a bit of a strange one. It's going to be a single bore tunnel, so it'll just be one tunnel for both projects. So I'm assuming that they're not really going to be moving thousands of people through those tunnels. So it might just be better just to use the one tunnel, because maybe they only need 600 to 800 people per hour. So that's, that fits the criteria really.
And does the traffic tend to go one way at one time of day and the other another way the other time of day, and so you don't really need back and forth at the same time of day most of the time?
I suspect they'll do runs in either direction every 5 minutes, and that's how they'll kind of use the tunnels.
And in the long run, if they wanted to, they could bore an extra tunnel. Is that right?
Absolutely, yeah. So there's no real issue if they wanted to add more tunnels at a later date. I suspect that when they eventually connect up the airport, they will do it with multiple machines at the same time. The one thing that they could do at the moment to really improve the boring rates is just simply to use more machines and use those concurrently. So they could maybe use 4, maybe even 6 machines at the same time. That's definitely an option they could go for.
Okay, why not TV says, Warren, I think you were talking about, I think this is about the boring machine building the walls behind it or alongside as it goes. And he says, I think you were talking about manufacturing the segments while Will was talking about assembling them. Let's go there for a second. How would a boring machine handle the process of building the tunnel walls as it tunnels?
So you'd essentially assemble the segments rather than doing it in a ring. Traditionally, you do it as a ring. So you might have 7 segments, and then the middle one would be like your keystone. You assemble your ring beam, then you would thrust forward. Then you would assemble your ring beam and you would thrust forward, and it'd be that stop and start method. Another way of doing it is you assemble 3 segments, and those segments protrude from the other segments, and you would use those 3 to jack forward, whilst you were then installing the other 3 in between, and you'd use a hexagonal segments to do that. There is a job that a company called Robbins & Co. did in Nepal, the Bari diversion tunnel, and they used these hexagonal segments. They were able to achieve 35.7 meters per day on a very consistent basis. So it's not new, but it's something that's kind of a trend in the tunneling industry. They've gone away from smaller segments to much larger segments, and I see that as the path forward to getting more meters per hour, as it were.
Okay, and then we have another question from Oliver Quinn. Proofrock, this is actually a question I should have thought to ask you.
Yes.
Proofrock expected specification details, please. So, first of all, how fast was Godot? How fast is the current boring machine, and and then how fast do you think Proofrock will be? What will the differences be? Is this all speculation, or do you have a good feel for where they're going?
I think I can tell you for Linestorm and Godot. In terms of Proofrock, really, I could give you definitely numbers. So Godot was just over, just off the top of my head, it was around 12 to 15 meters per day, depending on conditions, obviously. In terms of Linestorm, we've consistently seen for Tunnel 2 in and around the 27 meters per day mark. I suspect that they will do some further modifications to Linestorm and use that on these 2 new casinos. So it's looking like it'll be in around 40 meters potentially. As for Proofrock, if they can use continuous mining, that's straight away, that's a 3x improvement. So you're looking maybe 120 meters at the absolute best. With a few other improvements, potentially maybe even 150 meters per day. Who knows? But even if they only achieved 100 meters per day and they were able to use multiple TBMs, you're talking many miles per year. It gives you lots of scope for building quite a large tunnel network very quickly, and therefore you could take over the local town or city with the boring company system quite quickly.
How many meters per day is Gary the Snail?
So Gary the Snail can do 40, I believe it's about 45 meters per hour. In fact, I wrote it down. So Gary the Snail can do 1,156 meters per day. That is absolute best. So it's over a kilometer per day.
Okay.
Just under a mile. So a mile is 1,600.
So it's going to be a challenge to beat the Snail. That's not happening soon.
I think that we're at least maybe 5 to 10 years away from beating Gary, but it's good to have a target that you're always fighting to achieve rather than actually achieve it, because it's a very tough target. It's miles away from what we're doing right now. So Gary is doing more per hour than the current boring machine is doing per day, if you look at it like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So one of the things that you said really struck me was, I feel like we've got they're advancing the machinery. At some point they're going to get to a fully operating Proofrock, the machine that they're trying to achieve. And you said this, they can get where they want to go if they just build more machines. Once you have the state of technology of a machine that's working well and accomplishing what you want, just build more machines and you can build more tunnels. When do you think, because I was thinking that, if they want to do more projects or they want to do projects faster, just have multiple machines going from opposite ends and meet up, and you can do multiple tunnels.
Yeah.
You have 4 machines instead of 1, you can go 4 times as fast if they're the same machine, with some maybe things getting in the way. Do you think there's a point where are they waiting till they get the machinery to the level they want it before they start building multiple machines? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think they're going through the prototype stage at the moment with Proofrock. So they've actually built a Proofrock machine and they're doing testing with that machine, and there will be continuous improvement with that machine. Once they get it to a certain level where they feel confident with it, they'll then roll that out. And like you say, they'll build multiple units of that. We might potentially even see at some point a TBM gigafactory. Who knows?
I was going to ask you about that.
I was going
to ask you about that. That is a question. The machine that builds the machine.
Right. Yeah, literally. In terms of where I think they will be happy with Proofrock will be in and around 100 meters per day. I think that is a very good achievable target. But there's nothing. The good thing about Tesla and SpaceX and Elon Musk companies in general is they never accept what they've got. even if it's working well, there's always going to be incremental improvements. They're always going to try and test new things. So you could end up with a machine that does 100 meters. Next year, it could be 120. The year after that, 140. And you could end up essentially with machines that you are scrapping because the newer machines are so much faster. It's just not economical to run the old ones. So I think there's just so much potential there for building TBMs, and not necessarily just using them for the boring company. Potentially other people could acquire those machines and use them on their own projects. So there's a good business case for what the boring company is doing there. Absolutely.
Just a quick reminder to everybody watching that Will's channel, The Boring Revolution, is in the description. His Twitter is in the description as well. I'm a huge fan. I follow him. I try to watch every video. So I encourage anybody who's watching this to check out his channel and please subscribe. So there's a lot of questions about what we just talked about. I think we need to go a little deep. Well, let me go back to somebody asked the question, how many projects do they have going right now? So we know they have Vegas going. We talked about that a bit. I know there's a prospective project at Ontario County, California, Rancho Cucamonga, California, San Bernardino, California. Where does that stand? It sounds like, I think they're pretty much there, right? Is that going to happen?
So they were doing a study into a rail project for that area. Right. And basically what happened was they scrapped that investigation basically to negotiate with the boring company. So what that tells me, and what I've basically heard on the grapevine, is that the boring company is very close to winning that project. And again, hopefully we should hear something maybe in Q4.
Wasn't the rail project an insane amount of money, like more than $1 billion, and the Tesla project would be like under 100 million?
Yeah, I can't remember off the top of my head how much they proposed for that project, but it was well over $1 billion, which is just, it sounds exactly like the rail industry, which is basically run by the consultants and is a huge monopoly. But the boring company, the best thing about the boring company is it can go in there. It doesn't need below ground stations. It doesn't need huge tunnel boring machines. It doesn't need huge expensive trains. It doesn't need insanely expensive signaling systems. It can just roll out what it already has and do that for, a tenth of the cost, if not less.
Okay.
Just in terms of projects that are ongoing at the moment. So there's only one project that's under construction, which is Las Vegas. We've then got the 2 other potential extensions in Las Vegas. And there's also a proposal for linking the McCarran Airport and also the new Oakland, it's not Oakland Raiders, but the Raiders Stadium in Las Vegas. There's also the Dugout Loop, which kind of fell to the wayside and has now been looked at more thoroughly. So it's looking like there might be some more news in regards to the Dugout Loop next year. That's in Los Angeles. There's the Baltimore-Washington Loop, which is a very, very big project, 36.2 miles, dual tunnels. You have the Chicago Express Loop, which was unfortunately mothballed by the superstar mayor, Lightfoot, in Chicago.
She's popular right now.
Yeah. I mean, I hear a lot of news from across the pond, and it's not good. So there's a couple of other projects that have been proposed: the CERN Particle Collider, Blue Mountain project in Sydney. Those are the kind of main projects that are on the board at the moment. The boring company doesn't need to win all of them; it just needs to win a selection of them, and there's good money to be made there running those systems.
Right, now, one of the things that you said, something that really struck me, was you mentioned something about the speed and the conditions. That, like, when you're driving down the road, if it rains, maybe you drive a little slower. If there's snow and ice on the road, you drive a lot slower. You don't get weather conditions so much when you're boring, but is it that the rock changes, the material that you're what conditions change when you're boring that would affect boring speed?
It's just an absolute sandwich of layers underground, and until you actually go underground and see how it's structured, it's really quite difficult to actually predict what you're going to come across. A lot of TBMs actually use probes, so they probe ahead with a smaller drill that's around 4 inches in diameter, just to see what's ahead, because the actual rock conditions massively affect how many meters you can do per hour, and you have some TBMs where they go through a section of rock and they will literally plow through it, no problem whatsoever. They will come to an area, maybe it's fractured, maybe there's pockets of water, and the progress will go down 99% near enough. So the actual conditions underground can vary very, very considerably. The good thing about Las Vegas is that the boring company is going to be building a lot of tunnels there. They're going to learn about the geology, and they're going to get an understanding of what they're going to come across, and thus they can build the TBM accordingly to overcome those problems.
Do you need to change the head on the tunnel boring machine depending on what rock you encounter?
That is a great question. Great question. And I'll give you an example. There was a project in, I can't remember if it was Austria or Switzerland. And the TBM did the first 6 or 7 kilometers, no problem. They built a separate launch shaft. The TBM went in. They totally retrofitted the machine. They went from a main beam machine, which is kind of your typical TBM, converted it to an earth pressure balance machine, because the geology that they were going to hit was totally different, and it went through there relatively quickly. And that is the problem with geology, is that it can just change just like that.
Okay.
Very difficult to, yeah.
So a couple questions I want to address. Somebody asked this question, which I think is a great question. Do you think that they could use a Tesla boring machine for mining? Would it make sense to go to an area where there's a mineral you want? Maybe it's lithium, maybe it's, whatever, whatever the mineral you're looking for. Is that an efficient way to mine, or is it a very terrible way to mine? Or somewhere in between?
I'm obviously not from the mining industry, but you can find lithium in rocks. I mean, a lot of people think that it just comes out as a brine, but it is contained in rock form. So you could certainly pull out huge amounts of cubic yards of material from a TBM. There's probably not a better machine in terms of pulling out volumes of rock than a TBM, other than maybe a road header or something similar.
Okay, now I'm not sure what to do with this question, but I like it. Night Rhino says,
yeah,
one of the main reasons I'm personally interested in the Boring Company is for underground farming. And I see that for Mars. And I see that if you look at Kimball Musk's startup, I'm trying to remember what it's called, but he has a startup where they're growing food in containers, and they use electric lighting and other things to create the conditions. I don't think we're going to do underground farming on Earth. Do you?
No, I mean, when you look at the Earth and you look at how many square foot of land is unused on Earth, I think that maybe there's a bit more potential for using that. But on somewhere like Mars, absolutely. I think a lot of people talk about terraforming Mars, and they think that it's maybe 200 to 300 years into the future, but it's probably a lot further into the future than you think it is. So I think initially living underground and having large volumes of tunnels, that is how you're going to live on Mars. And obviously, if you need to live there, you need to farm. So you're going to have these underground farms.
Let's hold off on Mars. I want to talk about Mars later. So anybody who's watching, we're going to talk about the Boring Company and Mars later, because that's definitely where I want to go, but I wanted to do that later. So with Vegas, we're going to the casinos, we're going to the airport. That all looks like it's likely to happen. With Ontario County, San Bernardino, Rancho Cucamonga, that's pretty much a straight shot. Is it 2.8 miles from the airport to this train station in Rancho Cucamonga, or transit station in Rancho Cucamonga? There's only like one station on each end, I think. Isn't that right?
Yeah, so it's around 2.6, 2.7 miles.
Which is,
so
what is that, is that 4 kilometers for?
Yeah, just over 4 kilometers.
For those who are not American, yes. That looks like it's likely to happen. Dugout Loop is sort of up in the air. That may be more. And Dugout Loop is to Dodger Stadium from some transit stations. Yeah. Is that right?
Yeah. So initially that's been proposed as a single tunnel, but they're looking to add another tunnel to increase the throughput. Right. But you're still going to get around, I can't remember what it was, 18,000 passengers, 1,800 passengers per hour. So that's, pretty decent throughput for one tunnel.
A question I have for you that just occurred to me was, we were talking about, as we increase tunneling speed, as we improve the as the Boring Company improves the machines, then the tunneling speed increases. What about the effect on the cost per mile? So I believe the initial tunnel in Hawthorne, California, by SpaceX headquarters, they said that was $10 million for a mile. For the boring company's cost for doing the tunneling, not what they charged. Do you think they're able to get the cost per mile down for what they're doing in Las Vegas, or is it still costing about the same per mile? Not for what they're charging, but what it costs the boring company to do.
So the good thing about Las Vegas is I have a copy of the bill of quantities for that job, and if you exclude the shafts and you just look at the tunnel as it were as a separate element, they are achieving $7.7 million per mile in Las Vegas at the moment. When you start to include the launch shaft and the reception shaft, obviously the cost goes up, but just the tunnel, it's 7.7 million per mile, which is very good for a second attempt, as it were.
Right. So, and the hope is that the next tunneling boring machine will be more efficient. And what are the major costs? Is it energy? Is it parts that have to be replaced? What are the major costs that raise the cost of tunneling?
So around just under 60% of the cost is the actual concrete segments. That is a major part of the cost. Then you've got all the logistics of running a machine. Obviously, you've got a grout in and around the machine. That's a cost. Maintaining the machine, electricity, manning the machine, all those sorts of things. But the main cost is actually extracting the dirt from the muck from the machine. Now, a great thing about the boring company is the boring company bricks. If the boring company was to convert 80-90% of the muck into bricks, that would represent over 20% saving on the cost. So for example, in Las Vegas, if they were going to do that there, that would be 1.5 million saved per mile just by using the bricks and then selling them for 10 cents. So again, hopefully they'll do that. The issue with Las Vegas was because it was a EPB machine and they were using bentonite in there. The actual mix when it comes out is very, very wet. So it's very, very difficult to then compress that into bricks because there's a large content of water in there and other stuff.
So they're not doing it yet. So the hope is the next generation of technology will make bricks more possible.
Yes, very hopeful.
Okay. So a question I have for you. I wanted to talk to you about future tunneling prospects. I live in South Florida.
Yes.
I believe we have a non-rocky geology, but we have a wet geology. I know there's a tunnel. I don't know how much you know about South Florida. There's a tunnel from Miami to the port of Miami. So it is possible to do a tunnel here. But what are the challenges and what are some geologies that are particularly difficult? I don't know what you know about Florida geology, but are there particularly geologies that are more difficult for tunneling?
Well, yeah, as long as you've got the right machine for the job, you'll do well. But obviously, you're going to come across. So I'm very, very limited knowledge of Florida, but I understand there's a lot of limestone. You've got a very high water table.
High water table, definitely.
So yeah, very high water table, and you obviously have a lot of sinkholes as well. So there are potentially big issues there. But one of the good things with the boring company is potentially they could go deeper down and discover strata that is a bit more stable. So without seeing the specifics, there's definitely potential in Florida. Like I say, it depends on if you've got the right tool for the job, you can pretty much go through everything, even limestone. Yeah.
Okay, so just for the people who are watching, I have reached out to some Florida geologists. I reached out actually today, inspired by that this video we were doing this today. I reached out to 2 Florida geologists. I haven't heard back yet. See whether I could get somebody who's a Florida geologist to talk about whether it would be possible, because we have soul crushing traffic too. There's this particular spot for people who are in Florida who are watching. Anybody who's been to Miami, there's this spot called the Golden Glades Interchange. We have 2 major highways, the Florida Turnpike and Interstate 95, and they both go into Miami and they meet up, and it's like 6 lanes goes to 3. And it's just an awful backup. It's always jammed. You could be off, rush hour. It's insane. And if you were able to bore a few tunnels, let's say 4 tunnels into and out of Miami, it would make life so much better.
Yeah, I agree. It's the same everywhere in the world. Everywhere has got soul-crushing traffic. Here in Manchester, I used to work at the main conference centre here in Manchester, and it's only about 10 miles away. But if I left this house at the wrong time, it would take me near enough 50 minutes. If I leave nice and early, 20 minutes. There's a massive, massive problem with bottlenecks in Manchester.
Yeah, no, and it affects everyone. Elon. Elon is motivated about soul crushing traffic because it doesn't matter how many billions you have. Sometimes you have to put up with soul crushing traffic too. And you could say, you know what, I'll take a helicopter. Well, I'm afraid we learned recently from Kobe Bryant that helicopters are not necessarily the best option. So
you can't buy time. You cannot buy time. It is very valuable.
Right. So if you can, if this project you go for, this is the thing. Like, and I wanted to ask you about this. There was an interview. I forget who Elon was talking to. I remember if it was Joe Rogan, and he said that 1% of his brain cycles or less was devoted to the Boring Company. He got a lot of his attention on SpaceX and Tesla. He said like 5% of his brain cycles were on Neuralink. And when he said only less than 1% of his brain cycles were on the Boring Company, I got worried.
Yeah, I did as well. I got very worried. But the important thing to remember is Steve Davis is a very, very competent man, very, very clever man. And he's basically making 97% of the decisions at the Boring Company. And based on what I've seen and heard about Steve, very, very good. Extremely competent.
I think the idea is if he feels like the guy who's running it is doing okay, then he doesn't need to put his energy into it. We're making progress there. Yeah. And like it's kind of like with SpaceX, he needs to focus on the engineering of the rockets, but Hans Koenigsmann, I think is his name, is really good, and Gwynne Shotwell is really good at handling the business side. Yeah. So, he doesn't have to put as much into that. He's still chief engineer, whatever. He puts a lot of time into it. But, in terms of like the running of the company, he doesn't worry about that part anymore. He's focused on Starship. And he shows up for other things. Tesla, I see Tesla as like going to change the world within a few years. The Boring Company is going to change the world in about 10 years. SpaceX is changing the world in about 10 years. But Tesla, it's like right there, right now. And Neuralink, I'm like ready. In 10 years, I'm going to have a Neuralink installed. I know it. But
same here.
But I see, like, if the Boring Company makes the progress that we're hoping they make, and they get to that 100 meters a day, and they get to a certain, and they're delivering at low cost. I think it's the biggest thing is they're able to, like this Ontario County project, if they're able to outdo the standard approach to doing anything, and they can reduce the cost 10x or more, then they should be getting a lot more projects. So let's talk about beyond Chicago, the Loop, Baltimore, Washington. I guess what I would say is some dream projects. So let's start with your home. You're in Manchester. Is there a dream project for the UK that would radically change life? And let's say Manchester to London high speed Hyperloop, or what would certainly London has a lot of traffic, but London also has excellent mass transit. I haven't ridden it in a very long time, but my impression is London has excellent mass transit already. Where in the UK could the Boring Company do a really big project that would make a huge difference? What would your dream be? So maybe Manchester, but where else?
Yes. So the big talk at the moment is this kind of northern powerhouse, which is north of Birmingham and south of Scotland. And there's a lot of big cities in that area, but the transport links are not great.
Sorry, I just have to translate for Americans. I think you said Birmingham, but you said it with your accent. It was like Birmingham.
No, it's not Birmingham, Alabama. It's the real Birmingham.
And for those of us who don't know UK geography, I know where London is, sort of southeastern UK. How far north is Birmingham from London?
So Birmingham's about 100 miles north of London. So back a long time ago, when I was sort of a rookie engineer, as it were, I used to live just west of London in a place called Wiltshire, near Swindon. But Birmingham's about 100 miles north of London. London gets around 60% of all the transport funding in the entire UK, and the rest goes to a huge area. So it's very unevenly distributed. What I would like to see with the boring company is to build up a local network of tunnels linking the major cities. So you've got obviously Liverpool, you've got Manchester, Leeds, and then obviously Newcastle as well. And they're not a million miles apart. So Leeds and Manchester is only 40 miles apart, but it still takes you, 45, 50 minutes to get to Leeds. A city as big as Leeds and a city as big as Manchester should be really close together. And just across the Pennines is Sheffield. Sheffield has always been a very famous city in England, but the links to Sheffield are so poor. You won't get people working between those two cities. The issue is there's so many small cities, small towns as well, so close together. It would be really easy just to link them all up together, and that would be my ideal project. But in terms of really big kind of Hyperloop projects, I'd love to see a project I would actually like to see. Maybe people don't agree with me. Is linking Ireland to the UK. So obviously Ireland is separate from the UK only by about 30 miles or so. But if you could link Ireland to Manchester and then maybe Manchester to London, that would do a lot for in terms of integrating the country and providing travel routes. That would be excellent.
And that would probably be Dublin would be the main Ireland station.
Yeah. So you probably go to Belfast first, which is the capital of Northern Ireland, and then maybe go south to Dublin. You could maybe even do it as a loop and go all the way via Wales as well. So there's a lot of potential there. I think that's a long way into the future. I think linking European cities would probably be the biggest money earner, I'd say, if I was going to put my business cap on, as it were. So linking places like Madrid and Paris, Holland, Berlin, that sort of thing, maybe even Moscow, if you wanted to go that way.
I'm not sure about Moscow, but most of those already have high-speed rail links, don't they?
Yeah, they do. They have very good high-speed rail links.
And also, air travel in Europe, there's some very low-cost airlines that enable people to travel from city to city pretty cheaply, right?
Yeah. The high-speed rail in Europe has been a big success. It's certainly put a lot of pressure on the airline carriers, really cut down their profits.
Okay, so to me, the biggest project I see in the future that I see Elon being motivated about would be a Los Angeles to San Francisco loop or Hyperloop, because I've done that drive on Interstate 5. I've done that drive on Highway 1. Interstate 5 being much faster than Highway 1 being much prettier. Obviously, the loop would not be particularly pretty, but I think it's something like 300 miles or 250 miles, I forget, from San Francisco to Los Angeles. So if they can get to 100 meters a day, let's say, and they have 4 machines boring 2 tunnels coming in opposite directions, is it less than a year to build that project?
Yeah, in and around a year, probably less than that. There's a lot of jobs that you could be doing concurrently as well as doing the tunnels, so there's no reason why you couldn't build the stations straight away and then build the tunnels in between. So it's a lot of the time in construction we talk about our critical path, and that is you've got to do one thing to do another thing to do another thing. So if you could do various elements concurrently, you could probably do that in under a year if you had enough TBMs.
And there's a lot of traffic between LA and maybe you would add San Diego to this and pop in, Fremont. I imagine Fremont might make the list of stops.
Yeah.
I can see.
One project I've heard as well is actually linking the seat manufacturing facility in California to the actual Fremont factory. And that was considered because they had logistics issues getting the finished seats to the factory. And that would make sense from a cost perspective because it wouldn't be that difficult and it's not that far away.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So another one that occurred to me, and I don't know enough about China, but it would seem like Shanghai to Beijing would be very valuable, but there's probably already high-speed rail between Shanghai and Beijing. But I would just think that Chinese cities are very large, very populated. It's a growing economy. And I would say compared to the United States, and I don't know about Europe, the regulatory environment is much more friendly. If the government wants you to build it, you build it, and you don't have any hurdles to get in the way. In California, you want to build something, you need to get 25 regulatory agencies to sign off 10 times each to get anything done. Do you think there's
Yes.
promise for the Boring Company to be successful in China?
Potentially, in the long term, I would hope that they would focus on the USA, for the next sort of 5 to 10 years. And I think the main business is going to be in the USA. Once they've proven that they can do it and they can do the big projects, certainly other things will open up. Hopefully, the UK is part of that. There's going to be a lot of opportunities potentially with a trade deal between the USA and the UK. Hopefully, that gives us the opportunity to bring over some boring machines and build some new infrastructure. I mean, there's potential all over North America, Canada, Mexico, all sorts of big. The ideal situation is that you get into a big city, and you can link the suburbs to the center of the city and kind of connect it up, as it were. So somewhere like a big city like LA would be phenomenal to build out a big infrastructure network there.
Right. Well, the thing about the United States as compared to Europe and Japan, I don't know China as well. I lived in Japan. Europe and Japan and probably China, South Korea, they all have very, very well-developed mass transit systems where the United States does not. And we are all dependent on our cars, and we all face a lot of traffic, and we don't really have mass transit options. So a lot of cities in the United States have a lot of traffic difficulties, and loops, Boring Company tunnels could make a big difference. And also, at least before the latest crisis, we had a lot of money relative to the rest of the world. We can afford to do it. And long run, it saves us money. In the short term, it's building the infrastructure, but the payback on that infrastructure is really, really fast. Somebody said, you mentioned Belfast to Dublin. He said the Belfast to Dublin tunnel would be a challenge. Granite from the Mourne Mountains is some of the hardest deposits anywhere in Europe, stands between the two cities. Do you have any thoughts on that? Do you know much about that?
Again, you'd have to look at it specifically, location to location. There may be a very large deposit that might, be, 60, 80 meters deep. But what's below that? There might be some specific seam of rock that might be perfect for tunneling. Hard rock is actually good for tunneling because in some circumstances you don't need to assemble the precast concrete lining. So that's saving you time. But obviously the big problem is that your tungsten carbide cutters and blades are going to be worn to shreds after a few days. So you're just going to be constantly replacing them. Maybe there's some kind of solution, out of the box solution for that. I don't know. There is a company that I wanted to look at I think they're called Hyperscience. They're using some kind of railgun excavator, which potentially for that kind of situation where you've got very tough rock might actually work better than a TBM. But so that project I talked about previously in Nepal by a company called Robbins that is based in the USA, that was also in very, very hard rock, and they achieved 35.7 meters per day. So it is doable. You just need to triple up the TBMs.
Right. Use more TBMs. You can get anything you want to get done. You throw more at it, you get it done.
Exactly.
So somebody made this comment, which I kind of agree with. Aaron Bounds said this. The most benefit is going to come where the most people are, and that would make the greater Asian market more important. I was actually thinking about India, and I was going to ask you about this. Yes. I don't know how well you know Americans. We don't really know about the rest of the world. We tend to focus on whatever's happening in Washington, D.C., New York, and Los Angeles, and we don't know much about anything else anywhere in the country. And even in the country, we don't know what's going on in Canada. We don't know what's going on in Mexico. We've heard of Brazil. We know it's there somewhere. But my impression of the British is, especially with India, British tend to be more looking around the world. And so I was thinking about India because it's such a huge population, because the transit there is so... Hyperchange just had two interviews recently with, I forget the guy's name, where they were talking about India and whether Tesla... And I honestly watched the video and I was like, there's no reason for Tesla to go into India. That's never going to happen. The market's too small, whatever. But there's a huge number of people who would benefit if there was some way of getting them from point A to point B better, intercity travel, local travel, etc. What do you know much about India? Do you know if like with importing Tesla vehicles, that's very difficult because of tariffs, but if there are no local boring machines, maybe it wouldn't be hard to get boring machines in. Maybe if it was a government-sponsored project, that would be viable. Do you have any sense of whether there's potential for boring company in India?
Yeah, definitely. First of all, just watched that video with Gali and the other gentleman, and I just thought, wow, probably one of the best interviews I've watched in a long time. That I think he's absolutely right. You need local partners. You need to find someone in India who's got experience of tunnels, someone you can partner up with. India potentially could be the boring company's biggest market at some point in the future because the cities are so densely packed, and then there's large gaps in between the cities. So something like that would work really well in India. However, when I was at school, a lot of my friends were in Indian ancestry, and I still keep in touch with them. And a lot of the time, they go back to India and places like that, and then they tell me that the red tape is absolutely insane beyond anything you could ever comprehend. Any kind of building work or any kind of business you're trying to set up is just so difficult from an outsider's perspective. So trying to build a huge tunnel network in India could be very, very difficult, very, very time intensive. So there's a lot of answers for me there personally, but on paper, if you could link the big cities, or if you could just link the suburbs of the cities and create satellite towns and cities in and around, that is a big opportunity. Big opportunity. And the Indians like to be chauffeur driven, don't they? They like to be moved
The wealthy
around.
ones.
Yes, absolutely. If you could offer something that's more of a service for the middle class in India, that would be a big seller, especially if it's extremely fast, no traffic, safe, and cost effective.
Something popped in my head from something you said. When the guy's name was Vivas Kumar that he was talking to, and they talked a lot about 2-wheelers and 3-wheelers, smaller vehicles. Now, I don't know if you've seen my video. I have a video for those who are watching called Podcar Robotaxis. I think the future of Tesla is actually going to be single passenger vehicles that might be only 3 feet wide. And the reason that I connect this is, number one, small vehicles make more sense in India. That's what they're using already. But I connect that back to the tunnels in this way. Either if you could get the vehicle small enough, you could have 2 vehicles going the same direction in the same tunnel side by side. Or, and this is the one that I wonder about from a tunneling perspective, one of the big arguments for the boring company was we're shrinking the tunnel diameter from 28 feet to 14 feet, and that should quadruple the speed, at least in theory. So my question was, could you get if you got the tunnel diameter down to, say, 10 feet, 3 meters instead of 4 meters, if you brought the tunnel diameter down smaller, would that improve potentially tunneling speed, or is there a point where going smaller doesn't really give you that much?
It's difficult to say. If you've ever actually, I've never worked in the tunneling industry. My experience is in construction, residential, the water industry, that sort of thing. But if you've ever looked inside a TBM, especially an operating TBM, and you've seen how tight the space is, even in a 14, 15, 16-foot tunnel, I can imagine there'd be a lot of problems trying to reduce it further and have people operating in there at a fast pace.
Are you talking about operating the machine or operating inside the tunnel once it's bored?
Just both really. I think it would be difficult with a 10-foot machine. At some point, going smaller doesn't benefit you.
You don't gain as much, because the picture I had was, well, you'd be you said one of the big costs was removing the material. Well, if you do a narrower tunnel, then you're removing less material. And if you go to a smaller vehicle, if you say, you know what, we're going to run single passenger vehicles, or maybe they're tandems, they're 2 or 3 passengers long, but they're narrow, instead of being, if you think about like a Tesla Model X is about 78 inches wide. If you could get it down to 39 inches wide, you'd be half the width. That would easily fit in a 10-foot diameter tunnel. I wonder if there's potential for that in the future as a way of reducing the cost of boring tunnels. On the other side of it is, well, maybe we're going to use 16-passenger minibuses. The long-run plan is actually, which another video I'm going to be making in the future is the Tesla minibus. which Elon has hinted at, I think, is coming, and that would probably be a very good vehicle for these tunnels. But another side of it is, what if you had single passenger vehicles? What do you think about that general idea about? I know you've kind of said it doesn't gain you that much, but what do you think about that? Smaller tunnels, smaller vehicles.
I think my opinion differs a little bit. I think it's all about density and throughput. So you want a high speed and you want high density in the pods as well. And if you can platoon the pods, even better. So, I mean, it doesn't necessarily need to be, 16 passengers, 12 passengers per pod, but I think, in the high, 8 to 10 passengers per pod is probably adequate. I mean, I can quite envision a system where you've got a smaller diameter tunnel and you're running, say, like Archimoto vehicles through there, but I can't see that going, 120, 150 miles per hour. I can just see it more as a, kind of sort of standard highway dual carriageway speeds.
Right. Well, so in my Podcar Robotaxi video, I talk about that. There's the local commuter tunnels where you're not going to be going 150, 200 miles an hour. You're going to be going 60, 80 miles an hour maybe. But then you would actually have a different Robotaxi design for the thing that's going longer distances. That would be, the gearing would be designed for, not as much acceleration, but more efficient at higher speed and more aerodynamic. And I almost picture like it's not very tall and you're reclined. Sorry, I don't know if you can hear me. Your body's, instead of sitting straight up, you're actually reclined, or you're probably not laying on your stomach, but some way of setting it up so that you're much more aerodynamic. I think there's a lot of potential for that. Let's see hang on, let me just look at some questions here.
Cool.
Peter, I think you want to talk. If you wanted to come on my channel, please put a comment on this video, or I'm on Twitter at WR4NYGOV. WR4NYGOV. I ran for governor of New York in 2010. That's my Twitter. That's my Twitter. So if you send me a message there or comment on this video, and I'll follow up with you. I would love to have somebody else on. What is essentially a miniature subway? Yeah, long and narrow. Aaron Bound says, what about what is essentially a miniature subway train, long and narrow, with 30 or 40 people per vehicle? I think you agree with that. That's a real potential. I don't know if we need to go to 30 or 40, but
yeah, I think there's a kind of an optimum number. What you don't want is a vehicle that's so big that when it comes out on the surface, because with the Boeing company, you're going to do 90 to 95% of your traveling in the tunnel. But then if you want to get near to your destination, you're going to have to use the surface streets. So if you end up with a vehicle that's 40 foot long and it's driving through, someone's neighborhood, it's not exactly the most useful thing to have something that large and obstructive there.
Okay, so somebody just asked the question, and this is where I wanted to go. Thank you, K-pop. K-pop, great name. K-pop Lab Pro. I love K-pop. So
Korean.
So I love it. J-pop, K-pop, whatever. So I lived in Japan, so I love J-pop. So Mars. I picture life on Mars for the first 50 years or more is going to be underground. There'll be some stuff above ground, but a lot of what Mars has done is underground. Boring company machines could be very helpful for that. My big concern is the power requirement. That if you're going to, because Zubrin had this conversation with Elon. He said, you're going to need 6 to 10 football fields of solar in order to be able to power your colony. And I just had a live stream where we talked about solar versus nuclear for Mars. How much, in terms of kilowatt hours, megawatt hours, whatever, how much electricity does a boring machine use? Let's talk about the current boring machine and maybe the next one. How much electricity do you think it's going to use?
An absolute ton of electric. I couldn't give you an exact figure, but we're talking equivalent to maybe 6 or 7 Tesla semi trucks going at 70 miles an hour up an incline. It's a lot, because you imagine that is working against something all the time. So the power consumption of a TBM is insane. If it was running, pretty much 80-90% of the time, it would be considerable, but I can't give you an exact number.
Right. It's a lot.
It's a big number, really big number.
That's another reason why, if they went to, I'm fixated on my 10-foot diameter tunnels, my 3-meter diameter tunnels.
Yeah.
And
That's D12.
I actually, I think the electricity requirement would be lower if you were doing a narrower diameter tunnel,
Mm.
probably, because you're meeting less resistance. I just think there's tremendous potential for that. Maybe you have multiple, but you're going to have to generate a lot of juice, a lot of electricity to make this work. And 6 to 10, I think the boring company machine boring tunnels on Mars is not going to be. They're not going to send one in 2022. They're not going to send one in 2024. The 2022 mission to Mars is going to be, they're going to drop some cargo and just basically test, can we get there and can we land and can we do something with no humans. And 2024, I think it's really 2025. I don't remember if it's 2024 or 2025. The first crewed mission optimistically goes to Mars. I don't think they're using a boring machine yet. I think we're talking 2 to 10 years after that when the first boring machine lands and starts. And hopefully by that time, they've optimized more and they've figured out the plan. And maybe the early missions, they're doing some investigation as to what Martian geology is like. Because, do you think Martian geology might be more uniform than geology on Earth?
Oof, big question. I have no idea. I think the best tunnels that you could probably have on Mars are the ones that already are there, because apparently they have these lava tubes. But in terms of finding one that would be adequate, might be a bit of a discovery process. But it's difficult to say. It's difficult to say. Again, it might be a case of turning up and having a look and trying to find a good place to bore tunnels. And once you find that place, get your machine there and get going. But there's no reason why you couldn't bore tunnels in a certain way. You maybe bore it in a rectangle and then having it go in on itself. And then you end up with essentially a colony underground. We have lots of interconnecting tunnels in between the main tunnels. So there's good potential there. It's very interesting. But I think initially, like you say, they'll be based on the surface. A lot of the plans I see, they're using the existing rocks and dust on Mars and then putting that on top of existing structures.
Oh, yeah?
And then building things that way and 3D printing things like that. I think initially that's how they'll do it, but tunnels will come at some point. Hopefully the Boring Company can send out some of its machines.
Oh, just to correct me, the Heaven Man 88 says the Boring Company has updated the FAQ yesterday. I don't know if you saw that. They talk about why they won't change the size of the TBM and other tons of new info there. You should look at it. So thank you, the Heaven Man 88. I'm sorry I didn't see that. I should have read it before today, but I didn't know it was there. I will definitely read that after we're done with this live stream. Again, a reminder to everybody: Will's YouTube channel link is in the description of this video, as well as his Twitter. I encourage you to follow him. He's loads of information on an almost daily basis about what's going on with Boring Company, and I love his channel. Starship 2.0 1K ton payload will allow TBM transport. Yeah, I think that down the road, I think the current Starship 1.0, the current Starship plan may very well be able to transport a TBM to Mars. Maybe you'd need 2 or 3 of them. I don't know exactly how that's going to work, but I think that could happen. But again, I think we agree that's probably at least 5-10 years off before they start transporting boring machines to Mars.
You'd have to have all the infrastructure there as well. So a question that I got asked about a week ago was, hey, how are they going to build the concrete segments on Mars? And my answer to that is they won't. Concrete is exactly the sort of material you don't want to be using on Mars, because as soon as that's curing, it's going to be sucking all the air out of this place where it is. You don't want that. The best thing you can do is have some kind of foundry maybe, and you can make steel segments. The gravity on Mars is not going to be anywhere near what it's like on the Earth. So the pressures on the tunnel are going to be far less. So you could maybe, the actual diameter of the TBM could come down, but the actual diameter of the tunnel would remain 14 foot, as it were.
Does the lack of an atmosphere mean there's less pressure, there's less weight of atmosphere pushing down as well, or is that not important?
That's a big question. I'm not sure I can answer that. Probably. I'd have to research that particular one.
Okay. So
good question.
Let's just, I think we're close to covering everything I thought of. I'm going to sum up in a minute with some other, just to follow up on some things, but is there anything on your mind? Wait, no, sorry, you did your quarterly report. You just did that. I don't know if it was this morning or yesterday. what was the news in the quarterly? People, this is the latest video on his channel, but can you give a brief summary of what's in there? What do you cover in a quarterly report?
So we just so basically the quarterly report just has a list of all the projects that are currently either proposed, under construction, or cancelled. So it's just to look at what the projects are, where they are, how long they are, what is going to be the cost per mile, what is the status of the project, what is the current throughput of these proposed systems, and it just kind of gives us a good outlook of where the boring company is going to go in the next sort of few quarters, as it were. I think the most important development with this quarterly report compared to the last one was that we've got two new projects in Las Vegas, and we've got this project in LA as well, the Ontario Airport Loop. Yeah. So all in all, things are looking very rosy for the boring company.
Okay, before we go, we talked about something, and I don't think we got there. The machine that builds the machine. At some point, the boring company reaches the level where they have a machine that is close to what they're going for. They have, maybe it's Proofrock. They get to a Proofrock that is getting that 100 meters a day. It's lowered the cost to say $5 million a mile. It's got its energy, whatever and it's they're generating boring bricks the right way, whatever it is. At some point, do you see them building a factory to build boring machines? And then, because there's so many potential projects around the world, it seems like there could be a market for hundreds of these machines.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that is the next step, is actually building something that's purpose built to actually build TBMs in a fast and efficient way. Because currently, TBMs are kind of they're built like the cars were built 100 years ago. You just have a load of parts stacked there, and you just kind of build it in stages. Whereas you have something a bit more like a moving production line, where it's constantly adding parts as it's going down the line. Potentially, you could have somewhere maybe that's shooting out 1 to 2 TBMs every week, maybe a few more. Who knows? I think that's the way forward. I think one of the things that we've not really talked about today is Proofrock. And although we don't know much about Proofrock, the one thing that we have seen from the photograph that was on the Boring Company website was that they're going to be using the Europe method. And the reason why I was so bullish about the Europe method is basically the TBM, it starts on a gantry. It's mounted on a cradle. Rather than actually starting in a shaft, it's mounted on this cradle, as it were, and then it launches itself into the ground at a gradient, say a 1 in 10 gradient or maybe higher. And what that allows you to do is it allows you to get rid of reception shafts and launch shafts. They're a major part of the cost of building tunnels. So it builds a purpose-built ramp with the concrete segments, and then when it comes out on the ramp as well. So that is a big thing that's going to happen with Proofrock, and it'll be a massive cost saving again. So if we're using the bricks, that's getting us 20% off the cost per mile. If we're then using the Europe method as well, the ultra rapid underpass method, again, that's saving us at least 10%, if not more. There's definitely cost savings there. Another thing we've not talked about is precast concrete segments. Usually you have some kind of small manufacturing facility to build these precast concrete segments. Is there a way you can maybe engineer some efficiency into the manufacture of those? Definitely there's obviously improvements that need to be made.
Could boring bricks be used, or something equivalent boring bricks be used to form the segments, or is that not really viable?
It's possible. It has actually been done before in very tough. So we talked about going from Belfast to Dublin. Obviously, the rocks that you extract from the TBM are going to be very, very good quality. You could use them in a concrete, but obviously what you're extracting from Las Vegas at the moment is possibly the worst kind of aggregate you could use for concrete. So it depends on the location, as it were. But these are very bullish times for the Boring Company. I'm really hopeful that eventually, at some point, Elon Musk is going to turn his gaze, as it were, from SpaceX and Tesla, and give a little bit, even if it's just 5% more of his time. That'd be brilliant, to the Boring Company. and hopefully help push that project. And things are looking super good for the future.
So there was
very bullish.
There was a question from whynot.tv. Can you cover tunnels for dedicated mass transit vehicles versus tunnels to use private EVs? I feel like that's there's sort of like multiple personality disorder within Tesla about what the purpose of these tunnels are. Because on the one hand, it's like, hey, if your vehicle is autonomous, you'll be able to use a boring company tunnel. And on the other hand, this is, what we're seeing is projects designed for mass transit more than for private vehicles. Where do you think there will ever really be tunnels for private EVs, or is that a pipe dream? A pipe dream is probably a good term for that.
I really enjoy watching your videos about robo-taxis, and I just think there's an opportunity there for, you're sat in traffic maybe in your robo-taxi, and it comes up on the screen, it says it's going to be 45 minutes to your destination. You think, whoa, this is insane, what's going on here? Maybe there's been some kind of accident, or there's traffic, it's rush hour, and it says, would you like to pay $6 to use the Boring Company system and save half an hour? Most people who value their time would say, bing, press the button, get in the system, boom, you're off. If it's majority Boring Company pods and they've got 10, 12, 14 people in, that's great, but there's also space for a few thousand wealthy individuals who want to use the system when they're trying to avoid traffic, or maybe they want to get somewhere fast for a particular reason. There's so many potentials there, I think, for utilizing the system for other things as well.
By the way, that's definitely nothing. In Miami on I-95, when you pass the Golden Glades, there's express lanes that are pay lanes, and the price changes depending on how much traffic there is. And I have paid $7 to save 10 minutes. So, and the thing is that you think, well, that's not fair. The wealthy are getting a break, but you're taking those people off the main road, so you're actually reducing the traffic burden on the main roads. It's making it better for other people too. So, okay. So just to sum up, for everybody who's watching, check out the description below. You can see Will's channel, great channel. Watch it. We've covered Las Vegas. Talked about that earlier in the video. If you came in late, check at the beginning of the video. About 5 minutes in, 10 minutes in, we started talking about the Las Vegas project, which is moving ahead great. It looks like there's going to be a project at the Ontario County, California Airport, San Bernardino, Rancho Cucamonga. We talked about a lot of what's coming in the future. We talked about what might be coming in the near future, and we even talked about Mars. Will, I want to thank you so much. Is there anything you want to say before we say goodbye?
No, absolute pleasure talking to you today. Really enjoyed the conversation. I think this is a topic that's going to develop a lot over the next 5 to 10 years. And hopefully we can do this again and discuss future improvements and developments.
Thank you, Will. I hope we can do this again too. Really enjoyed it. Have a good day or good evening.
Thank you. See you soon.
I'm still here.